In this episode of the Business of E-commerce, I talk with Kevin Urrutia about how to find suppliers in Asia. This is the Business of E-commerce, episode 143. Welcome to the Business of E-commerce, the show that helps e-commerce retailers start, launch, and grow their e-commerce business. I'm your host, Charles Plesky, and I'm here today with Kevin Urrutia. Kevin is the founder of Voy Media, where he has started several e-commerce companies. His most recent company, producing luggage, we brought him on the show to chat about how he went through the process of finding suppliers in Asia to produce the luggage. Super interesting, and just talking to Kevin about his whole background process and how he kind of thought through the process of getting this business started is very interesting and I think helpful for anyone just starting off or even someone experienced. Right at the very end of the show, he also dropped some really helpful nuggets on what he would do if he was just starting off today. So I think it's well worth listening right to the end. Let's get into the show. Hey, Kevin, how you doing today?
Hey, Charles, I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Awesome to have you on the show. Super interested in, we were talking earlier, so about finding suppliers in Asia. But I guess some of your background real quick. So we're talking in 2020, and what do you guys do? So sell luggage currently?
Yeah, so for Chester, we sell luggages, online luggages. So that's a carry-on, probably one of the most popular sizes. But then about like maybe 8 months ago, we released like the other two sizes, the medium one and the check one. But yeah, for like almost a good year and a half, we only sold the carry-on because we didn't have any cash to make the other ones. Yeah.
So you started, what, a year and a half ago? Or how long has this been around?
Oh, now, yeah.
Okay.
But like actual selling, but then we were in like product development for a good like 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
then being of like the products and stuff. Yeah.
So when you say product development, kind of let's go. So at what part did you actually, when you say product development, what part were you developing? What part did you talking to suppliers, and like how did this whole process happen?
Yeah. So for the Chester luggage, so this is my second e-commerce company. For Chester, everything on the luggage is actually custom made with the supplier that we work with, which is great because obviously you probably know with e-commerce, like you can say, hey, like this is one thing that was actually kind of funny. We're like, hey, we want to make a luggage. And they're like, okay, like, can you make a luggage like this company? And they're like, nah, like we don't work like that. And we're like, no, because like we're so used to that, right? Like you just see that online. But with them, they wanted us to pretty much pick everything. Like, and that was pretty exciting and also scary because we'd never done it. But like, I kind of like that. So we were able to pick the wheels. They sent us like a catalog. You probably know, like a catalog of like wheels, shells, interior lining, and then colors. And then we had to just design the full shape of it. And then they needed like a AutoCAD drawing for that. So then my brother is actually we used to go to architecture school, and he helped us design it and send us like the drawings and measurements and everything like that. And then that took about like, I'm explaining it really quick, but that took about 6 months because we're trying to learn everything about a luggage, handles, components, zippers. I know, obviously we know luggages, but we didn't know how to design everything. So then we also worked with, even the zippers were all custom made. So we worked with the YKK factory, which is the company that makes like, I mean, pretty much every zipper you probably use, like a Levi's, for example. And we had like a custom C design it for Chester. And then we worked with the official like TSA locks to make the locks for like Chester on top. So then it's 2 zippers and then it's like half a C. So then when you connect them, it looks like a full C. So all that stuff is pretty custom. And then of course you can make it like TSA approved for their luggages, so like they can use their key. So that was pretty fun working with them. And then bigger thing was like the interior lining of how we want to sort of lay things in there. And that was pretty interesting. And sort of like what interior bags. So some features like that. So everything on that luggage was custom, and also the shell was custom too. We got a few patterns that they told us, and then we had to pick like sort of like the roughness or the texture of it. So that was pretty interesting. And then the handle, so that's another big one. So yeah, everything on there was like custom, and the wheels are like some Japanese wheels that we picked that were like 360 screw spinners. So those were pretty fun.
So how did you actually, so did the manufacturer kind of have all this in the catalog and kind of just like run you through like a menu of this? Or was it really up to you to go and like, all right, like we'll manufacture luggage, but you find us a zipper? Like how did that process actually kind of go down?
Yeah, so basically, yeah, that's a good question. So basically they said like, hey, for the zipper, they said like, hey, if you want a zipper, let us know which one you want. And they're like, go talk to YKK. So then we would have to they would tell us to contact the YKK.
Okay. Could they have given you a zipper, or was it literally just like if you want a zipper, you got to talk to like the zipper guy?
Yeah, they can give us zippers, but we're like, if we're gonna make everything custom, we're gonna might as well make it custom because this was already gonna cost us about like 150K for the molds. They're like, hey, just like if you're doing this custom design, you probably want to do custom stuff here. That's why it took us so long to make the other sizes because we just can't afford another mold because we're bootstrapped. But they told us like, if you want this, go talk to these guys. If you want this, go talk to these guys. And then we'll contact them and say, hey, we're looking for a zipper for luggage. I'm like, okay, here are the standard ones. And then we're saying, okay, how do we add like a C? And they're like, okay, this is how you would do it. And they're pretty helpful to do it because the factory we're working with was legit. And they gave us great advice and tips on what to do. So, and then they would just be like, we just measure things. We'd just buy luggages that we thought were cool, and then we'd measure them, and then we'd say, hey, this is kind of a pattern we're thinking about. How do we make that done? So then they would send us fabrics here and stuff like that.
So it's almost like the factory's like your advisor, right? So they give you kind of the menu of like, here are the 100 different whales we have, but if you want some other whales, you have the whale guy you can talk to, and he can make you just come up with a design, and he'll do it for you.
Yeah, they basically tell us like, hey, we can add this, and they're like, based on the design you have, it probably wouldn't look good with a stock one. You might want a custom one, and they would tell us like why, like because like the welding might get stuck with like the design. The biggest thing that we had to design was like kind of like the look of the luggage, like the kind of you look at our luggage, it's kind of like square, rectangular with like rounded corners. That was like the main one, and then we told them like they would tell us like, hey, if you want to handle like this, you probably want like a beveled one. That way, when someone pulls it up, it doesn't like mess up or like sticks out. So they were kind of like they were experts. They'd done a ton of luggages, so they knew kind of what to sort of expect and what to think about. So they were very good at that because, of course, we never designed a luggage before. So they were like kind of telling us like, I don't think that would work well, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, that brings me to the question too. How did you even, to back up way up, how did you even find this factory, right? Because it sounds like they were giving you great advice, but you were like leaning on them a lot too. So how did you actually find a factory that you were like, I trust them enough to like, first, go with them and spend 150 on molds, but then second, just like lean on them for that much advice?
Yeah, so basically for us, like I have another outdoor gear company, and that's sort of like we were able to find factories through like traditional like Alibaba, AliExpress that way. But something that we saw over there was kind of like everybody sees now is like it's so easy to copy stuff. So when we wanted to do the Chester luggage, we went to look at who's making the best luggages that we like. And of course, you probably know Samsonite, Toomey, right? Like great luggage companies. So then what we did is, from our experience of learning from my other company, we knew that everything that was imported from China or from anything goes through the port, and the port has the government documents. So then we went to the port website and said, where this company is importing from. And then we looked at the legal factory names.
Wow.
And then we went to my friend that was in China at the time saying, hey, can you call these guys up and see if they can make us stuff? And then they're like, yes, we can. But they only spoke Chinese. So then our other friend that spoke Chinese was able to translate everything for us and speak with them. So it's more about like just reverse engineering where it is, because from our previous friends, we're like, hey, like it needs to go through the port. So you know that everything's documented because, and there's websites that do this too. I'm not sure if you know, like there's like a website called like Panjiva, and then it shows you like, it also shows you stats about like when they're importing the most. So then you can get like they say, hey, it looks like this summer people are importing more clothing, so there's probably an uptick of sales because if they have more importing, they're importing more, they probably think they're going to sell more, right? So that's sort of how we did it. So any company has some sort of legal name. You probably know, can like sometimes people hide it, but you need to display that to the U.S. government when you're importing stuff, so you can't get away, and then just reverse engineer where they're coming from.
Okay, so to make sure, because this is good, and I think a lot of people get really hung up on this step here on how to actually like find someone reputable, right? So you basically said, let's find someone we like out there. So Samsonite, let's back up and now find out where they're importing into. So let's just assume somewhere on the West Coast and start basically now figure out, you can look up the government documents. And did you use Panjiva for that?
Panjiva, yeah.
Okay.
Panjiva. Also like Panjiva's paid because it's like, they like filter it nicely for you with like filters. But if you go to like the raw, like I think it's like DH something, Department of Home Security, right? Department of Home Security has a website of importations, and then you can just like scroll through the documents and try to figure out from there yourself. Yeah.
Yep. So then you started, so you literally just went to the government website and you could just, and you do this and you search the raw documents and it's like, what is all this stuff? Like, there's just like hundreds of these random things, but you found the import document that shows, and it's basically like the handoff, right? Of like factory A is now handing it to Samsonite, wherever else in the US. And you found that kind of exchange and then said, what is that factory name? And then went to your friend in China and said, can you go talk to the guy at that factory and get in touch with them?
Exactly. And then they're like, oh yeah, we make it. And then they're like, hey, like, do you guys have you guys ever have a company before? We're like, yeah, we haven't had right. And then they're like, oh, well, like we have like a huge, like minimum order quantity. We're like, no, like, and then we basically with these legit factories, that's what's great about them is that like, they just wouldn't say yes to us. So sometimes it's like annoying, but for us, it was like, oh, wow, this is great. That means the barrier to entry is pretty high. So that means that if the barrier to entry is pretty high, that means it isn't a thing something can easily copy. Of course, it's like you can make a luggage. It's not, I think it's rocket science, but there's a little bit of steps that sometimes people get caught up on. And for me, I was like, oh, great. Like, I love this right now.
Yes. I talk about it all the time where I think some people discourages them. And it's literally the exact opposite on like, oh, they rejected me. I want them more now. Whoever rejects you, like the one that they were like, yes, we'll make you luggage. We'll can send you one piece right now. You're like, I don't want that guy. Like, stay away from him. But as soon as they're like, no, it's huge. We can't even talk to you. You need at least X amount of million. And they're like, all right, how can we make this work?
Exactly. That's like, we're like, how can we make this work? We're like, okay, like we have experience. Basically, we told them like, hey, they went through. We're like, hey, we have experience. We're selling e-commerce already. Look at our previous company, and they're like, okay, it makes sense. And we're like, can you make our stuff like in between runs? And they're like, okay, we could do that. So then they would make it like at night in between stuff, and then until we told them like we can finally start making more.
I like that. Yes, it's funny and I've talked about on the show before. I used to have a dropshipping company, worked with a bunch of suppliers. And initially when I went to talk to like supplier A, they were like, absolutely not. There's no possible way. And over time started working with some more entry-level suppliers, let's call them. But then I went back to supplier A and said, no, look at my track record. We're doing great. They were like, oh yeah, great. We can talk. I'm like, okay. Yeah. So having that company, and I think everyone kind of missed that. If you go to them and you're like, I'm starting off, like, how can you help me? People are like, no way. Like, but if you go to them and you point to like, maybe we're starting this off today, but we have this other successful business that this one's doing fine. Then all of a sudden, even though you're just starting company B today, they're very likely to talk to you just because you're showing them, I know what I'm doing. I have a track record. And that's kind of the proof that everyone wants.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, once you can show that off, it shows that like, you're not going to waste their time because they don't want to waste their time. Like teaching them basics of like how to import, like they don't like, by that time, we already had like a 3PL. We already had like our importation documents, our licenses, like we had all that stuff. So it's like, we're not asking these questions that for them are like very basic, right? Like,
and you had that all through the previous, the first company, right? So you were just going to store the products in the 3PL next to the existing products. So, and you already had importer ready to go. So like this was just basically calling the importer and saying, this is some extra products coming over from this other factory. Exactly.
Just basically figuring out what the new taxes would be, importation taxes would be, right? Obviously, like with the new stuff that happened with Trump, we're like, oh crap, it's going to affect their stuff. And so it's like figuring out what that is. But we already knew what that was from our previous company. So like we could show them like, look, we already have our license to import. Like we just need you. So they're like, okay, like you guys are serious, right? It's like seriousness that they're looking for, right?
Yep. Yeah. And they just want to see you kind of, like you said, aren't going to ask those basic questions and get all the products manufactured and say, all right, what do we do next? And like lean on them it's one thing leaning on them for like the zipper, right? Like maybe you're not you can go to them and explain, I don't know luggage that well. And like, I might need help with the zippers, but like, I know importing, I know fulfillment, logistics, like that, at least I've done something before and you're just gonna need to help with the zipper part. And like, they're okay with that. Okay. Got it. That is very cool. Yeah. I think so many people, that little step right there, that trips up so many people right there. And just like, I talked to the factory, they said no. And you're like, all right, cool. What did you do? Like, so what do you do next? And they're like, well, they said no. And you're like, no, that's just the first step. They're supposed to say no. That's the right thing.
Yeah, it's the right thing. Yeah. And then we're like, okay, like then we're persistent. Like even the guy, his name is actually Jeff. We told him like, go to the factory and talk to them. So really, he literally went to the factory and was like, all right, because like we were traveling at that time.
And this is just from your other business. So you have the other business, Jeff worked with you there, and you basically said, can you just like drive down to this other city and talk to these guys over there?
Well, I've known Jeff for like a while because we were working on stuff like through like other projects, and then he was already there. And we're like telling him like, hey, we need a partner that can help us get this going. And then we're like, hey, can you join us? And he's like, all right, cool, I'll join. And then he was the guy that like I always tell people like. Something you have to partner up with people. Like it's like, hey, I can't do anything myself. I'm like, hey, if this guy's in China, he's an expert. He can do it for me. And then he owns part of the company too. And now he just dealt with like the factory, getting all the fabrics, all the translation, because we still needed somebody. We knew it was going to be a process, right? So we're like, hey, look, we can't pay you, but we'll give you part of the company if you can help us figure out this logistic thing. And then he was doing all that for us and translating it, getting all the documents, and going to the factory and checking things out for us, which is what we needed.
Today's episode is sponsored by Drip. Drip is the world's first e-commerce CRM and a tool that I personally use for email marketing and automation. Now, if you're ever in an e-commerce store, you need to give Drip a try, and here's why. Drip offers one-click integrations for both Shopify and Magento. There's robust segmentation, personalization, and revenue dashboards to give you an overview of how your automation emails are performing. One of my favorite features of Drip is the Visual Workflow Builder. It gives you a super easy way to build out your automation rules visually and see the entire process. It lets you get started quickly, but also build very complex automation rules. It's powerful, but also easy to learn, unlike a lot of email tools that offer the same type of automation. To get a demo of Drip today, you can go head over to drip.com/BOE. That's drip.com/BOE. Now, onto the show.
Okay, so you actually made him a part owner, so he has skin in the game. So it's not like he's just trying to, you're going to pay him per hour and he can just kind of wander around for 40 hours a week. Like he wants to see this actually product get created, product get imported. Like he needs this to work just as much as you do at this point.
And plus, like he knew like we have previous track record. He's like, oh great, let's try this thing. It seems like a cool project with you guys, and I think it's we're like, yeah, that's worth it. Like I tell people like sometimes it's worth giving someone equity because they make them want to work harder. But at the same time, like equity is worthless if you don't have anything. Like I would tell people just give something. Like forget to become successful, great. Like you all made money together. Sometimes people get so caught up in like, obviously you probably know, like, oh, I don't want to give equity. Like your company's not worth anything. Like if you guys both make it something, then yeah, why not give somebody a share?
Yeah.
But so I've been at least for me, like through experience, and just like I've done so many companies, I've had so many LLCs. I'm like, this equity is worthless because it didn't go anywhere yet.
I think people, what they get hung up with there is they see like how far they've went and they think, well, I went this far alone and like, so I deserve this much more. And I think the people that first time don't realize, no, like you're still at like, you haven't left base camp yet. Like there's Everest and it's still like, you're still hanging out at base camp eating breakfast at this point. Like, like, oh, I came up with a name and a logo and like, you're like, yeah, you haven't left base camp. Like,
that's nothing. Yeah, name and logo. I'm like, I tell people like, oh my God, like, what's the logo should be? I'm like, just make it anything. Like, who cares? And like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the first when you get, and that's people are reluctant to give equity because they see the work they've already invested and they think, oh, this person hasn't been here since the beginning. But like, they just don't realize that they're still at the beginning at this point. And yeah, like getting the product from like, and they haven't, now you have to find the factory, you have to negotiate with the factory, you have to get there's all these other steps. And this could take, like you said, it took you 6 months, and that's with experience. And that's with like the logistics side already being, so it took 6 months and you already had pretty much 80% of it figured out. So
we still need help. And
you still need help.
Yeah, you always still need help with like a mentor. It could be like someone equity partner, but even like you probably know like mentors, coaching. I think that's probably one of the biggest things for as you sort of learn more, you realize, oh wow, I don't know anything. Like, and I think it's the biggest thing. Like when I was like 20, I was just like, I know everything, and then I'm like, oh crap, like I don't know copywriting, I don't know this, I don't know. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are so pros. Like Jesus Christ, how can I learn from them? Like, what's their course?
Well, that's one of the first times you hire a copywriter is a good example because you're like, I know how to write. I learned writing in 4th grade. I can do this. And then you hire a professional copywriter, and you're like, wow, you're a lot better than anything like I've seen before. It's like, what I could produce in 3 days, they can produce in 3 hours. So it's just, and I could produce a bad version in days. They can produce a really refined version in a matter of like an hour. And it's like, oh, that's a difference. You're a professional. I get it.
Yeah. I think sometimes people get caught up with that. But yeah, like I think it's always great having partners or just like mentors that you can lean on, even with experience, because then you can just get there quicker.
Yeah.
Which is sort of, as you sort of get older or just like want to do things, you don't want to figure them out. Like it's fine, but like you're like, how do I get quicker now? Like
yeah. So now once you got the factory, Jeff, right? What's his name? You said is literally
yeah.
Jeff's the guy. Was he? So now was he negotiating for you with the factory? Like when does that actually? Right, because this is the beginning where you're trying to court them, right? And then now they've kind of accepted you, but then now you're trying to negotiate with them after this like courting process. What was that? How did that go?
Yeah, so for that, we basically were talking to Jeff and asking him like, hey, like what do they need for us to make the luggages? You know, what are the minimum order quantities? When they can produce? How fast we're looking to produce? But the biggest thing for this was this was like a tricky sort of kind of place because they didn't know if they could make it for us because we also didn't have the full like 3D AutoCAD drawing ready for them. And then they were saying like, hey, look, we can't really quote you or know everything in this because we don't really know what you want. But if you guys are serious, we'll help you get that drawing done. And that's really when they saw that we were actively working on this sort of 3D thing for like 2 months. They said, okay, these guys are still like serious. Because like anything, like you get excited for a month and then like the next month you're like, do I really want to work on that? Like, and then you have like, at least for me, you have like 100 domain names in there that you're like, oh, that was a good idea. Like, and then you work on it, right? But like, it's that sort of like persistence. I tell people like, it's just basically months of like them seeing, okay, these guys are still like trying to get this thing done, right? So, and then they saw that, and then we just basically negotiated how many units we wanted and the price, and then we're telling them like, hey, like, of course we can't make too many at once because we just like don't have like that much cash, and also we didn't have a place to store them because obviously a luggage is a pretty big item. Yeah. So that's one thing that we didn't realize too much. Like we knew it was big, but we just like realized how big it was until like we're like, oh wow, we can't really store that much at both. Like, it's like damn, we can't be doing too crazy things here. So yeah.
When you couldn't store it in your 3PL, I know some people, I've heard this before, they leave it right in the port. Or they don't even like they ship it over and just leave it sitting in, I forget the term, but basically you like just leave everything at the port and then you can't ship anything from there, but you can only ship it to your warehouse or your 3PL, right?
Yep.
Is that what you guys did? Or?
Yeah, that's what we did. And then we left it there. And then, so basically we used two companies, another 3PL that's I think based in Boston. And then we also just sometimes send direct, because we're on Amazon too. So sometimes we just send directly to Amazon. So then we will just tell the port to just like drive it to Amazon, or the company that we're using, just like pick it up and drive it to Amazon's warehouse. But that's how we did it. And then in the beginning, we were storing it locally in Brooklyn at another, kind of like right where I live right at the moment. But we didn't like how they were doing it. So then we kind of switched to a different one because they were like kind of messing up orders.
Okay, so they were using them as your 3PL. So you were moving it from West Coast all the way to Brooklyn and then using that as your 3PL?
So we were doing two. So we were sending it some to West Coast and some to I think it's like New Jersey.
Okay. Okay. So you had split away. Okay. So you split the coast.
Split it based on Okay. We're like, split it because traditionally we see that West Coast has some sales, and then if in case we need some sales in like East Coast, we don't want like delay shipping. So
yeah.
So that's offered like 2 day on our website. So we just want to make sure that you can get that done.
So this makes me think too, when you started talking about you were looking at competition, how did you even decide to get into this space, right? Because you didn't look and you're like, luggage, like no one's making luggage. You looked and said you were like, there's other companies making great luggage. We should go make some luggage. Like, why did you do that? Yeah,
so I did luggage because I was like looking at that. I was like, oh, how come like there's like no direct to consumer luggage companies that I think were competing with like Samsung and Tumi? And that's where that came from. I was like, oh, like I can, like I was doing the outdoor gear company. I was like, oh, I could do this, and then that was like my mentality, like, oh, I could do this. I was like, I don't think luggage is that special. I was like, let me look up a luggage. Like, obviously it's not hard, but I was like, at the same time, I was thinking like, hey, it's not a special product. I'm like, why does it cost like $1,000 or $2,000 for a good luggage? And then when we went to like our factory, we're like, oh, these guys are making a ton of money. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, oh wow, like based on these cogs, like Jesus Christ, like I don't think people are realizing. But basically, we were really big on Amazon with that other outdoor gear company, and we just saw like the outdoor space just get dominated on Amazon. But for some reason, like when we're looking for a new business, we're like, oh, like we just see like trends like, hey, like outdoor gear is super expensive. I was like, let me think about luggage. And then I was looking at through like at that time, Amazon was still very, like these companies, like these big luxury brands, they didn't go to Amazon because they're like, oh, look, we're a luxury brand. We're not going to be in Amazon. Amazon's like a cheaper thing, right? But obviously, as Amazon has grown up, like Amazon is completely like, just said like, I don't really care what you think. Like, you're going to buy our stuff on Amazon because they just like dominate the e-commerce market. And then we saw that luggage companies weren't on Amazon. They were some, but not like good looking luggages.
Yeah. Okay.
So, oh, great. Like, let's enter this market because now this really big item, which is great because most FBA people didn't want to spend the money on like large stuff. It costs money to make a luggage. So like we had like a big like investment like $250K that we did ourselves, all bootstrap. And then we saw like it's gonna take time. And then we just saw like the marketing, like we just saw like, hey, this is a great opportunity for us because it is not like other markets on Amazon. For some reason, like people just don't enter luggages, and now when I've done it, it makes more sense. It's like just a crazy hard product to make. Not hard, but like just time, right?
Yeah.
It's just like time. Yeah,
and that's a difficulty, right? When you're first in it, you look and you're like, that's easy, I could do that. Why isn't everyone? And then you do it and you're like, oh, that's why everyone does it. But if you just keep pushing, then you realize, all right, well, I'm halfway there. Like I already did most stuff that most people would have kind of tripped over at. So let's just keep going now. Like, because then you realize not many people can follow us either because this just isn't easy.
It's not easy. Yeah. So like even for like our company, it's like a very small item. And like, it's a kind of what you said before, like starter Alibaba. It's like, hey, can you make this? Like, okay, great. How many do you want? It was like, it's so simple to enter, right? It's like, okay, great. Anybody can enter. So then you see like, it's a price war of like, okay, your price is $50. Okay, mine's going to be 48. Okay, let me make 47. It's like, all right, where are the margins here, right? Amazon's the one that's making money. So,
which it sounds like that's also fun. You did that and you started there, right? So that wasn't, maybe that's not and now you're competing on a product that is very intangible to price, right? Like luggage, you look at, it's the same thing like a mattress. Like you go to the store and you're like, why is that one 400 and that one's 4,000? Like they both are square queen mattress. Like they both kind of the same, but like luggage is one of those things where one is just
value.
Yeah, it's very hard to fit. It's one of those few products. There's a few products out there that are just extremely. A mattress is my classic example, but luggage is one of them too. That like you're like it's still the same suitcase. You can put the same amount of stuff in it, but like like you said, Samsonite just costs a lot more than that random one on Amazon that probably came from Alibaba that like the zipper falls off, right? Yeah. So you found that space of just saying like, let's just sell a premium one on Amazon. No one else is doing it right now.
Exactly. Yep. That's really where that came from. It's like, hey, like let's try this because based on our previous experience, we saw Amazon just so much traffic, and I was like, there's definitely people looking for luggages online, at least for like quality ones. I was like, and then even for us, like when we started selling on Amazon, we're just like, whoa, like it's crazy. Like how many people are actually buying luggages online? Because they're just like, I mean, like it's like anything. It's like I'm like a avid traveler. I'm just like, I travel, but like, it's not like, oh, I'm going to like start a travel blog. I'm just like, whoa, this is crazy, the demand. And I was like, that's wild.
Yeah. I think once you get any consumer product, you realize how big the market, even I've sold some pretty like odd products before, and you get into it and you realize like, wow, there's a lot of people that are into this real weird thing right now. And just like, even something you think is kind of niche, you're like, there's a lot of people in this niche.
There's so much. Yeah. I think there's so much money in niches. And even for us, when we saw like our Amazon stuff, we're just like, whoa, like, damn, Samsung and all these luggage companies are making millions of dollars. Like, I didn't even realize how much money they're making. And then that gets you excited. I'm just like, whoa, like that like excitement, like it's like, oh man, this is a good idea then. Yeah. It's like, oh, we did a good thing. Yeah.
So then you realize you're a small fish, but it's okay to be a small fish in a really large pond. And you're like, this could be big, right?
Yeah. So we were so excited because like great luggage, we were going to get reviews. We were doing like everything for e-commerce. We were reaching out to YouTubers, reaching out to influencers. So we just learned all this stuff from my previous company. And we're just like, we got to start off like this. And then we're doing a lot of organic SEO. We're getting about like 50,000 organic visitors a month now. So all the stuff that we learned from previous companies that we built, we just like started it instantly. Great. Like you look up, like I tell people like something like a luggage or anything that's kind of like expensive, maybe $100 plus. I always tell people the first thing people are going to look up are going to be like product name reviews. Yeah. So what you do is reach out to every influencer or blogger that you know early on and give them a piece of your luggage, or like when I say a product, not like your company, but give them a piece of your luggage to try and test. And what's going to happen is if they love it, they're going to write about it. But if they don't love it, they're going to tell you, hey, Kevin, I didn't really like your product. Sorry, I'm not going to write about it. It's much better that than when they buy the product and they don't like it, because then they're going to write a really heated review about why they don't like it. So,
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So it's worth giving away free luggage.
Yeah, it's worth it because then like that's like, and then I tell people like, at least my strategy is like, I'm really big into SEO. I'm like, get those top 10 search terms to be stuff that you contacted with bloggers because then you have great relations with them. And they say, hey, look, I see that like your article's going down. Let's add a little bit more content. You want another luggage? Like, yeah.
That
so
is
it's great to have these relationships with people, these bloggers, because they want product. I'm like, hey, look, like I'll give you another bigger one if you're another article. Like, yeah. They're like, yeah, I love your luggage the first time. Great, send me another one. I'm like, all right, great. What color do you want?
So it sounds like too, you started with Amazon was like your first channel. And you're like, let's just get this flywheel kind of spinning. But as soon as you do that, now it's like, all right, now let's kind of run our SEO playbook. We already know. Let's run our influencer play. Like we've already done these playbooks with the other company. And you're just so you got your Amazon marketing channel going. And now it's just like, let's get the next channel going, and like SEO influencers kept going down the list.
YouTube reviews. It's like, I mean, you probably know, it's like building a company isn't just like one channel. It's like, all right, you got to like do everything. And it's like, okay, we know how to contact people. We've done it before. Let's get our cold email tool out. Let's get the subject line that worked and let's fucking start doing it. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's getting the playbooks ready. Yeah.
Yeah. And the playbook is really, I've got that term from a few folks and it feels like the most applicable, right? Where once you kind of learn that playbook, like you have your blogger outreach SEO playbook and it sounds like you executed it before it worked and you just run it on this company. And sometimes you run it on the second company and you're like, oh, it doesn't work on this one. Like, okay, scrap that, next one.
Yeah, exactly. Even for like the influencer marketing for Chester worked so much better than when it did for our outdoor gear company. And the reason why, and like we were thinking about it, because I think founders as a person just need to think, why did it work this time? And for us, we're like, oh, travel is like something that people like showing off. So the models and Instagrammers, they love showing off. They love traveling because everybody has like this great life on Instagram. So if they're traveling, they can easily show off their luggage. So it worked a lot better for Chester because they love the product. They would then repost it again on all the trips. Whereas the outdoor, it was like, hey, I'm going hiking once. And they're just like, well, I'm not really hiking again. Like, and then we would only get like basically one photo. For Chester, they're posting it every single time. We're like, oh, this is great.
Very cool.
Yeah, so like you have to think like it could work, but this for Chester just worked better. And we just got a lot more content. Like, and now for us, we're just like, whoa, like, it makes sense because like, especially like our female influencers, the pink one, that's like they post it every time because they can match their nails, everything. It is so great. So yeah, it's like how you said, like sometimes it works better or sometimes it works okay. So that's why sometimes it's like, hey, just try it. You never know what can happen. And we're just like, whoa, this is crazy. Yeah, so much better.
And that's a good lesson right there. You just try it because you might know the playbook, the execution steps, but you don't know how they're going to pan out. And people are like, yeah, I tried like social media or paid ads or whatever. They tried something, they're like, it didn't work. And you're like, great, just try the next, like whatever the next playbook is, just execute that. It might be fantastic. It might be a flop. And it's almost, I think as an entrepreneur, you learn, I have no idea. Like I literally like, sure, maybe it works, maybe it don't. But like, it's faster to try a very small, reach out to a few influencers and just try it and see if it works. And then if it works, great, double down. But if it doesn't work, then either you have to go back and ask yourself, did I screw this up somehow? Or maybe it just doesn't work for this company and just move on. And it's just rinse and repeat.
And exactly, even for like, and the great thing about for Chester too was that, we were selling online. Of course, like any product, you have returns. And people were like, oh, I just didn't like the size or didn't like the color. Okay, great, return it back to us. And then we would get those returned back to my mom's house out here in Long Island. And then when we reach out to influencers, we'd be like, hey, look, you want like a slightly used luggage? Instead of us sending them a new one, my mom would just like clean it up a little bit and then she would send it out to them. And they're like, oh, this is right? So then you got to like, instead of us throwing out storage, we reused it. I'm like, hey, this is a cheaper way to give out product. And I was like, you got to be like, we're bootstrapped. We got to save money somehow. I'm like, I'll just like wipe it down because most people like, people would just buy things. They're like, I don't really like it. And it's almost new. And
that is the trick. Most people, they think they have to do it this really big thing. I used to at one point have returns. It was in another office I had, and the whole wall was just return. Like it was just a wall, and like it got to a point where you had to kind of walk sideways, and we're like, all right, it's getting a little stupid, but fine. And like, and one of the other guys in the office is like, you can't do this anymore. This is getting ridiculous. And like, no, we can just put them on the wall. Don't worry about it. And like, that's just what you do, and it's okay.
It's yeah. Even for our office here in the city, we had like boxes of returns, and like people would come in like, do you guys want a luggage? Like take any color you want. Take any color you want. I was like, we don't need them anymore. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Before I let you go, this is super helpful. If someone is sitting home and they're hearing all this, but they're like, I don't have another business yet. I want to start. Like, they're that person that kind of, they haven't got that first foothold yet. What would you say to them right now and recommend they do as like step one in this entire process?
I think for step one is, it's tricky. I'd say like, just think of something that you want to do. And I always tell people like, I think like we talked about before is like, think about like a stair-step approach. Like the first thing you're going to do, it's not going to, maybe you're not passionate about it, maybe you don't love it, but you're going to learn something from it. And once you learn from it, go to your next business. Like my first company was a maid company. Was I passionate about cleaning? Maybe not, but I was passionate about making, learning how to sales, learning SEO, learning marketing, and just learning business in general. And the reason why I did maid companies is because I knew there was demand. As probably see with anything I built, I want to know, is there demand? Because if there's demand, that means I can enter the market and sort of learn marketing or business in general. So I would say like, just take something that you know, kind of maybe you're interested in, and then build it. And the maid company is still running. So we're like, we have like 103 maids now that work for my company there. So yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that. And I've quoted, I think, I don't know if you've also got that, Rob Walling, quoted him on the stair-step approach on this podcast before. And that's kind of, I'll link to that somewhere in the show notes. And same concept. You start with something, and you don't have to start with like, I'm going to become this huge luggage company. You start with, I'm going to do something that's just reselling something or just something. And you start learning pieces of business, right? And fine, I learned marketing, and maybe I didn't learn logistics and warehousing and inventory management and all that, but I learned marketing. And now you have that like one skill under your belt, and now you can apply that to business too. And I love that. Yeah, I love that advice. Awesome. If people want to kind of find you, learn more about you, follow your work, where can they do that?
They can just go to voymedia.com or just Kevin at Voy Media. But I'm also like big on Twitter. When I say big, I mean just like no one follows me. No one follows me. I'm like an average Twitter user. So you can just find me on Twitter. It's like twitter.com/Danest, DANEST.
Awesome. I will link to the show notes.
It's like an old username.
Yeah,
hey, no one.
Yeah. Wow, maybe we'll get some more followers. I'll follow you now. So there you go. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. This is super helpful. And we'll link to the show notes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good one. Thank you.